Hey guys, it's Sagar, and in this video, we are going to take a very detailed look at all the cameras on this iPhone 16 Pro. Now, I took over 2500 image and video samples with all of these cameras ever since I got this phone, so we have a lot of image and video samples to look at. But before we get to those, let us take a brief look at all the specifications of these cameras, because each and every one of these cameras is upgraded on this new phone. The main rear camera still retains 48 megapixel resolution, f1.78 aperture and 28mm lens, but it's a new sensor with 2 times faster readout speed, which means it can capture a lot more information in much less time, giving us almost lag-free shutter response time. This also enables 4K 120fps video mode, which as we will see later is incredible. The ultra-wide camera gets a huge upgrade as well. It now gets a 48 megapixel sensor up from 12 megapixels on the iPhone 15 Pro. It also gets a slightly wider f2.2 aperture and a 13mm lens. While the resolution of the sensor behind this ultra-wide angle lens has gone up by a lot, its size however remains the same, so each individual pixels are now much smaller. It should however be able to take slightly better images thanks to pixel binning and slightly wider aperture. The third camera at the back also gets an upgrade on this iPhone 16 Pro. Up until last year, we got 3x telephoto lens, but this time we get a 5x tetra prism periscopic zoom lens just like we saw on the iPhone 15 Pro Max last year. This is a great upgrade as it allows you to increase your reach. At the front, we get the same 12 megapixel camera with f1.9 aperture and 23mm lens. While it is a good camera and lens combo, I feel like it is time that Apple gives us some good upgrades to this camera as well, as it has been the exact same for the last 3 years. Now, one of the major things that Apple introduced on the entire iPhone 16 lineup is the camera control button. It's a cool new way to interact with the camera app. It is a pressure sensitive button which performs various actions when you tap, press or move your finger across it. Now this looks and sounds really cool in theory, but the reality of using it is a bit different. Now I had some concerns about the placement when I first saw it in the renders, but I decided to keep an open mind and give it a fair try when I actually get the phone. There were a few days where I forced myself to just use this capture control button to take the images, switch the camera or make any adjustments, and those were the days I ended up taking the least amount of images with this phone. I just didn't like the experience. First, its placement makes it a bit difficult for me to reach without either having to extend my finger a lot or without covering the display. And second, there are just too many gestures and taps needed to make any small adjustments, which actually made me miss some of my shots, so I didn't end up using the camera control button after those initial few days. I found navigating through my fingers on the camera app interface is much faster and simpler. With that out of the way, let us move to the image samples which I took during the bright daytime. A nice sunny morning and a bright blue sky. These are pretty much ideal conditions for any smartphone's camera, and this is an iPhone that to top of the line one, so it should not be a surprise that it is taking such amazing shots. But as I said at the start, I took a ton of images with this phone and some of them were in cloudy and overcast type conditions, and as you can see from this image, it does a really good shot in these conditions as well. Now I'm sure some of you might have seen a few other camera reviews of this iPhone 16 Pro, and for some reason a lot of them actually have some color correction or their personal LUTs applied to the image samples, or they just relied heavily on the video samples throughout their camera review. Which I guess is alright, but that doesn't actually give you the right idea of how the camera performs by itself, especially when it comes to clicking images. So as always, in this video, all the images that you are going to see are totally untouched without any color correction or LUTs applied on top of them. The main camera does get a 48 megapixel image sensor, but by default it captures bin 24 megapixel shots in order to keep the file sizes smaller. That being said, even the 24 megapixel shots have incredible amount of details in them if you ever need to zoom in on any particular part of your shot. Apple says that the binned images also let them extract more information from the scene, resulting in better dynamic range. Now this time we didn't get a new generation of HDR algorithm for the images, and the smart HDR algorithm which we first saw on the iPhone 15 series last year is carried forward this year as well. But I don't think that is a bad thing, as this iPhone 16 Pro does really well in these high dynamic range situations. You can see how the brighter parts of the scene are not blown out while the shadows are brought up enough to make the shot look balanced. Now I appreciate that this phone doesn't overdo the HDR effect and doesn't make the image look completely processed. It lets the scene look natural. I know there are some phones out there which do a much better job with the HDR algorithm, but those images just don't look very natural or realistic to me. I'm sure you know the effect that I'm talking about. I like the approach that this iPhone 16 Pro takes. If you want, you can go ahead and edit these images to bring up the shadows even further, or bring down the highlights and even saturate the colors a bit, all from within the Photos editing app. I do this for some of the shots which I feel need a bit more improvement, but largely I like to keep the HDR shots as they are coming straight out of the camera. I've always liked the colors coming out of the iPhones, and this iPhone 16 Pro is no different. It tries to keep them looking as they were in real life and doesn't look to add too much saturation or contrast to them. I do feel that sometimes it tries to make the shot look slightly warmer than how the scene actually was. This is fine for the outdoor shots where there is sunlight and those shots tend to have some natural warmth in them, But you don't expect to see that warmth indoors unless you have warm lights. So I hope Apple is planning on addressing that with one of the software updates. That being said, if you don't like the colors which are represented in these images, you get the new photographic styles which now give you even more granular control of how the colors, contrast, exposure and saturation in your images look. As it was earlier, you can either set this before and have it baked in all of your shots, or now you can even apply these photographic styles after you have clicked the image, which is a really nice and welcome change. Now we come to the close-up shots. This phone gets a massive 48 megapixel sensor. So if you're coming from a phone which is more than a couple of years old, you must be used to getting very close to your subject while taking these close-up shots. But on the iPhone 16 Pro or most of the newer phones which has very big image sensors, you will have to be a couple of inches further away from your subject in order for the lens to set the focus. The resulting close-up shots look really good with the subject being in perfect sharp focus and the background getting a very nice natural bokeh thanks to the wide aperture on the main camera. If you feel like these shots are not close-up enough, on the iPhone 16 Pro, by default the focal length of the main camera is set at 24mm. But you can tap on the 1x button once to switch to 28mm and tap on it one more time for the 35mm focal length, both of which takes you much closer to your subject without having to physically move your phone closer. And I feel this gives you much better looking close-up shots. Now this is digital zoom and not actual optical zoom, but since the image sensor is very big, even these digitally zoomed in close-up shots look almost lossless without any image quality degradation. In case you want to get even closer to your subject, you have the option of taking macro shots as well, and here are how they look. These shots are being captured with the ultra wide angle lens, and since it gets a 48 megapixel sensor, these macro shots have incredible amount of details in them. You can get as close to 2.5 or 3 centimeters to your subject and still be able to set the focus on it, which results in such amazing looking shots. When you're capturing these shots, just make sure to be very steady as there is no image stabilization on the ultra wide angle lens. And since you are so close to your subject, even the slightest shake or vibration could result in a blurry image, like you can see with some parts of this macro shot. To avoid this, I find it is best to rest my hand on some objects to take the support so my hand stays steady while clicking these images. By default, this phone is set to go to the macro mode automatically, and while these shots look good, they are nowhere as detailed as the ones from the main camera. So if you wanted to take a close-up shot of some object and if you move your phone too close to your subject, the phone will switch to the macro mode and that image doesn't look as good as the close-up shot from the main camera would have. To make sure that the macro shots are only captured when you want them, head over to the settings app, scroll down to the camera, then go down to the bottom and make sure that the macro control option is turned on. Now when you go back to the camera app and move closer to some object, you will see this symbol pop up on the lower left of your viewfinder. If you keep this on, this will automatically switch to the macro mode when you move close to an object. But I suggest keeping it off and only switch it on when you want to take macro shots and then switch it off again. Trust me, it will make your normal close-up shots look a lot better this way. When I'm taking these images, I don't like to carry around a big and bulky case to protect my phone. But at the same time, I can't not use a case and risk it gathering some scuffs and scratches. That is where TAC, our sponsor for this video, comes in. They make amazing super thin cases for your smartphone, and this is their new standard case 4.0 for the latest iPhone 16 lineup. It comes in Arctic Frost and Granite Frost colors. These cases barely add any weight or bulk to your phone while covering all the sides and buttons. The camera module at the back gets a very pronounced lip which makes sure that your camera lenses or even the metal rings around it will never touch any surface. There is even a cutout for the camera control button so you can reach and use it just as you normally would. And even the display gets a bit of protection as there is a small lip at the front. Now at 0.7mm, this case is extremely thin and it is actually translucent. Despite of that, it is pretty tough as well. TAC has used new materials for this 4.0 series case which feels much tougher and durable. Now this combo feels really good in the hand, almost like you are using the phone without a case on it. Because they are so thin, they work flawlessly with MagSafe accessories, but if you want enhanced magnetic strength, you can go with the MagSafe Plus magnet accessory for that added peace of mind. Now if you are someone who doesn't drop your phone and you like to use it without a heavy and bulky case, but you still want to add a thin layer around to protect it from everyday scuffs and scratches, these TAC cases are perfect for you. You can check out TAC cases and other accessories from the link in the description section and use this code at checkout to get a 10% discount on your order. Other than letting you take macro shots, the ultra-wide angle camera lets you take, well, ultra-wide angle shots. Look at how much more of the scene this 13mm lens will let you get in the shot compared to the normal 24mm one. It gives us a completely different perspective of the scene and lets us show the scale of things as well. Now this lens also comes in handy when you want to capture a wider scene, but you don't have more space to move back and capture the scene with your main lens. Now I mentioned this earlier that the ultra-wide angle lens also gets a 48 megapixel sensor behind it, and its images are definitely sharper than the ultra-wide angle shots from previous iPhones, but these are still not as sharp as the ones from the main camera. Although it now has 4 times as much resolution as before, the physical size of the sensor has not increased a lot, so each individual pixel is smaller. Apple again uses pixel binning on this sensor, so the resulting images combine information from multiple pixels into one, all of which results in more detailed looking shots. This time it also gets a slightly wider aperture which lets in more light, but the effect of this is mostly noticed in artificial and lower lighting conditions, which we will look at a bit later in the video. For now, let us check out how the zoom on this phone works. This is a 2x digitally zoomed in shot from the main camera. This is digital zoom, and they have been mentioning it for a couple of years that they are cropping in on the middle part of the 48 megapixel sensor and capturing these 12 megapixel 2x shots, which according to Apple makes them pretty much lossless zoomed in shots. Now I don't know if these are lossless or not, since there is just no way for us to verify that. But these zoomed in shots seem to have the same amount of details as the 1x shots on the main camera, so maybe there is some truth to what Apple is claiming. The final major upgrade to the cameras on this iPhone 16 Pro is the addition of the 5x telephoto lens at the back. So this time, this iPhone 16 Pro gets the same tetra prism 5x lens as the iPhone 15 Pro Max. This gives it a lot more range, and even though these 5x zoomed in shots have a resolution of 12 megapixels, they look a lot more detailed compared to the 5x digitally zoomed in shots from last year's iPhone 15 Pro. I had a lot of fun shooting images with this lens, but honestly, even after almost 2.5 months of using it, I still feel like the 3x telephoto lens on previous iPhones was more useful for my photography style. This is just my opinion, and I'm sure there are people who find the 5x lens to be more beneficial, and that is completely fine. I just didn't feel like I was in a lot of situations where I would need a 5x zoom lens. Now all of these images that I'm showing you are the only shots which I took with this 5x lens. In my everyday usage, I did not find as many distant things that I would like to shoot with this lens. Now if you're in some mountains or maybe attending a concert or something, those are the cases when you would want to shoot distant objects, and then this 5x lens is definitely going to be more useful. We can keep on zooming in digitally up to 25x, and I don't feel those shots look all that good. But these 15x images, which are digitally zoomed in shots on the 5x telephoto lens, look incredibly detailed. If you have a steady pair of hands, you can get really good and usable results until 15x from this iPhone 16 Pro. Beyond that, the images start looking too grainy and basically have no details. Now this was shot with the 5x telephoto lens, but the main reason why the zoomed in shots from the main camera also look so good is because of the huge 48 megapixel sensor behind it. As I said before, by default it captures 24 megapixel binned images, but you have the option of capturing your images at 48 megapixels as well. These are how the 48 megapixel shots look next to the 24 megapixel ones. You might not see a clear difference between the two straight away, but once you zoom in 5 to 6 times, you can clearly see that the 48 megapixel shot has much more information. The 24 megapixel shots look slightly sharper till maybe 2 or 3x zoom. That is because they have some artificial sharpening being applied to them. The 48 megapixel shots have overall much more information no matter where you look in the shot. So when you're capturing a shot where you know that you will be zooming in on a particular part later on, or when you need to edit your images later on and you need to capture as much information as possible, you should switch to the 48 megapixel mode. For rest of your shots, I think you should stick to the default 24 megapixel mode, since those shots also have incredible amount of details in them, and the high resolution shots are at least 2 to 3 times bigger in terms of file size. On top of that, you will have to zoom in 5 to 6 times at the very least to see those extra bit of details, which I don't really feel is worth the bigger file sizes. So for most of your images, just make sure that you are sticking to the default 24 megapixel resolution on your main camera. That brings us to the portrait mode. This is my favorite mode to shoot in on any smartphone. Whenever I have people in the shot, I just switch to this mode, and I feel it makes your images look a lot more professional and helps them stand out from rest of the shots. I'm sure I'm not the only one who thinks this way, because since last year, Apple gives us something called auto portrait mode. What this does is, whenever you have people in the shot, or when your phone detects a face, or when you tap to focus on any particular part of your shot, the phone starts to capture depth information as well. And if you want, you can make these portrait shots later on where the background is blurred out. I feel this is a really nice touch, and more people should know about this, so their images could end up looking a lot better. Now at this point, I don't even think that we need to talk about the edge detection for these portrait shots. It has got so much better over the last few years that this phone rarely misses the edges of the subject anymore. The LiDAR sensor helps it with this, and I have seen this mode evolve with each software update on all of the previous iPhones, so any imperfections that you might see right now will definitely be ironed out with a few software updates in the future. You can also see that this iPhone 16 Pro is again doing an amazing job with the dynamic range. It is not letting the brighter parts of the scene blow out, and at the same time it is making sure that the shadows are not too dark. These are 2x zoomed in portrait shots, and even though this phone doesn't have a dedicated 2x lens, you can see that the faces in these ones look just as sharp as they did in the 1x portrait shots. I feel like the 3x telephoto lens on the iPhone 14 Pro and 15 Pro was the best for taking portrait shots, but these 2x digitally zoomed in portrait shots also look very good. And while taking the portrait shots with this iPhone 16 Pro, I used this focal length the most. The 5x telephoto lens lets us take excellent looking portrait shots like this. The faces in these shots are not as sharp as in the portrait shots on the main camera, especially if you are shooting in indoors or in less than ideal lighting conditions. Despite of that, these images have an amazing feel to them. Since this camera has a smaller image sensor and narrower aperture, make sure you are shooting these 5x portrait shots when there is plenty of bright light around. The only issue with these telephoto portraits is you have to move very far away from your subject for them to be in the focus. I am talking about being at least 8 to 12 feet away from your subject, if not even further. Or else the complete frame of your shot will be filled with just a part of your subject, and the zoomed in portrait shot just won't have anything in the background to blur it out. These shots seriously look like they have been clicked with a much expensive DSLR or a mirrorless camera with a dedicated prime lens in front of it. I feel like these portrait shots look the best when you take them outside and when there are some interesting bits of things behind your subject, as that is when the lens compression of the telephoto lens makes the overall shot look amazing. Same is true for portraits of things or objects. If you are clicking them with the 5x telephoto lens, I suggest it is best to do so when you are either outdoors or you have plenty of artificial light around if you are indoors. The edge detection is pretty much accurate for these portrait shots as well, and if you feel it is a bit off, then you can go ahead in the Photos app, hit the edit button and tap on a different part of your subject to see if the edge detection gets as good as you want it to be. You can even play with the aperture slider and see if making the aperture a bit narrower, or in other terms reducing the blur amount, helps or not, as a narrower aperture is a bit more forgiving about these things. With that, let's move on to the images which I have shot after the light started to get a bit lower. Now most of the phones which came out in the last couple of years have been doing really well in bright lighting conditions, but some of them did start to struggle a lot when the light starts to go down. So to find out if that is the case with this iPhone 16 Pro or not, let us check out by looking at some of the images which I took in artificial and lower lighting conditions. Now I have already mentioned it a couple of times before that this phone's main camera has a huge sensor behind it, and that combined with the wide f1.78 aperture and sensor shift image stabilization helps this phone take really good shots when the light gets lower. It manages to capture a ton of information in these situations even without breaking a sweat. Apple says that there is some special coating on the lens to reduce the lens flare, but as you can see here, when you have the light source directly in the frame, you will still be getting some of the lens flare in your shots. There is a lot of ambient light in these shots, but these are in fact low light shots, and I feel the main camera along with the image processing pipeline is doing a really good job of not letting any of the noise creep in these images. As we get to even lower light, this phone is being able to capture this much information with the same shutter speed as it did during the daytime. I mean, it is not taking any longer to capture more information in these low lighting conditions as well, and if I zoom in, you can see it is still capturing amazing amount of information. I feel pinning the 48 megapixel worth of details that are being captured with the main camera into a 24 megapixel shot is helping in capturing such detailed looking shots with so much more information even when the light is this low. I like that Apple is not making the images look too processed by either bringing up the dark areas way too much or by adding some sort of artificial sharpening to the low light shots as some of the other manufacturers do. It's nice that they are letting these images look natural. Even the colors in these shots look exactly how I could see them with my own eyes when I was taking these images. All of these are normal low light shots, and I'm amazed that the iPhone 16 Pro doesn't even seem to want to switch to the night mode until it is very dark, which I feel is a nice thing, as when you are shooting in night mode, there are very high chances that the shots are going to end up looking blurry because of how long you have to hold the phone steady. I remember when I was taking images with the iPhone 15 Pro in same locations last year, it did move on to the night mode very often for quite a few of these shots. When the 16 Pro does switch to the night mode though, the results are incredible. I might not make too much about this shot, but you had to be there to see how dark it was when I took this shot. There was basically no light, and other than the small lights around the trees in the distance, I could barely see anything with my eyes, but somehow the night mode on this phone managed to gather all this information. This shot took 3 seconds to capture, but I am really happy with how it turned out. Although it might seem that there is ample light in this shot, trust me, the light below the trees were not as bright as they are looking in this shot. Somehow this phone managed to capture a huge amount of information in this night mode shot as well, and for this one it just took 1 second to gather all this information. Even though this phone is trying to capture more light in its night mode shots, it is still letting these shots look like they have been captured during the night and not trying to make them look like daytime shots, and I really appreciate this. Usually I don't take a lot of shots in night mode, especially if I have people in the shot, as chances are someone will always be blurry in your images, as no one likes to stand still for 3 to 4 seconds. That being said, I ended up capturing more of these night mode shots with this iPhone 16 Pro than I did with any of the other phones. Even for my camera reviews, I normally shoot 2 or 3 night mode shots, but here since I took a lot of them, I managed to squeeze in 6 or 7 of them, which might be the most number of night mode shots that I have shown in a video. I think this should tell you that if you have the patience of holding your phone steady for these shots to be captured, they will most definitely turn out looking great. The wide lens gets a new camera and a slightly wider aperture, and this helps in lower lighting conditions. This is a wide shot of indoor artificially lit scene. I think this iPhone 16 Pro makes it look really good. Even as I zoom in on this shot, we see a lot of information and very little noise, which is always a good sign. Here are a few of the night mode shots with the ultra wide angle lens. Now I know these shots are definitely nowhere as sharp or detailed as the night mode shots on the main camera, and they also take a lot longer to capture, so you will have to hold your phone steady for a lot longer. But in the end, I feel like these night mode shots from the ultra wide camera are definitely better than the night mode ultra wide angle shots from any of the previous iPhones. You won't see these ones bringing up the light as much as the night mode shots on the main camera, but at the same time these are surprisingly clean and noise free compared to the wide shots from any of the previous iPhones that I have tested. I still won't be using this lens very often once the light goes down, but if you are someone who is planning on using this lens after the sun has set, you can still end up with some very good looking shots if you have steady pair of hands. The 5x telephoto lens gets the narrowest aperture, and this sensor just gets 12 megapixel resolution, but since its size is bigger than the ultra wide angle sensor, it takes much better images in lower lighting conditions, as you can see here. I am honestly surprised to see these kind of details from this telephoto lens in lower light. To be fair, although it is night time, there is considerable amount of ambient light around, which seems to have helped it take such detailed shot. In much lower light, this lens resorts to the night mode as well, but just look at how detailed this 5x night mode shot turned out. I did not expect this lens to perform so well in lower lighting conditions. Even if the light is very low, it still manages to capture a lot of details. As I said before, I wasn't expecting this lens to perform so well in lower light. This time, Apple really seems to have worked a lot on all of its rear cameras, at least on the iPhone 16 Pro. Something which they haven't been able to work on is the lens flare issue. In some of the shots like this one, we don't see any of the flare even when you have the light source directly in the frame. But in shots where you have a slightly brighter light source, you will definitely see these kind of reflections in your shots, which are very distracting. These have been present since the iPhone 11 Pro, and for some reason Apple hasn't been able to get rid of it. Now there are some ways to reduce these flares in your shot. One of the ways, you can keep on moving your phone around until these flares coincide with the corresponding light source. But for that, you will have to change your composition, which might not result in the best looking shot. This issue becomes really irritating when it ruins a good shot. With that, we come to the front facing camera. This is the only camera which hasn't been upgraded on this year's iPhone 16 Pro. It's the same 12 megapixel sensor that we have been seeing for a few years, and I feel like it is due for an upgrade. It still takes good looking selfies, the colors look natural, dynamic range is on point, and there is an overall natural look and feel to these selfies. But I still feel that this camera can use a few extra megapixels, so we have even sharper images, possibly with slightly better depth of field. It does get autofocus, so the objects which are closer to the lens are slightly sharper compared to the ones which are far away in the background. But since the image sensor is very small, we don't see a huge difference there. So as I said, it could use a slightly bigger sensor at the front, so we have slightly more separation between the subject and the background. There are quite a few competing smartphones out there which take much better selfies with the front-facing cameras, and if Apple wants this iPhone to be the best possible camera throughout, they are definitely going to have to step up their game with the front-facing camera. You can switch to the portrait mode if you want to have more depth in your shot or introduce some blur to the background. I have the aperture or the f-stop number set to f2.0 in these portrait shots because I wanted to show you the edge detection, which I feel is very accurate in these portrait selfies. But if you want to have more natural looking portrait selfies where the blur to the background looks more believable, then I think you should be setting the aperture number to something between f6.3 and 8. The skin tones, dynamic range and colors look good in these portrait selfies as well, and because everything else is blurred out, the face looks slightly sharper in the portrait selfies compared to the normal ones. Here's a video from the front-facing camera of the iPhone 16 Pro. You can see how it handles the overall colors of the scene, exposure and stabilization when I'm walking around with it. The audio is also being recorded internally and there are a lot of vehicles passing by, so you can let me know how this phone is handling my voice. Now this part is being recorded in cinematic mode. You can shoot cinematic mode videos with the front camera and the main rear camera of this phone. The key to make these videos look good is to shoot them at a higher aperture value. This video is being shot at f6.3 and you can see the edge detection is pretty accurate and the blur to the background is also really good. When it comes to shooting videos, all of the cameras on these phones can shoot 4K 60fps videos and the main rear camera can now even shoot 4K 120fps ones. You can shoot them at 120fps and play them back as they are, or if you want, you can go ahead and slow them down right from the photos editor. You can switch between all of the rear lenses when you're shooting 4K 60fps videos, as you can see in this video. Now this is something which you can't do on all of the other phones which offer 4K 60fps video shooting options, and the iPhone does it so seamlessly, which is one of the reasons that makes it one of the best phones out there for shooting all your videos. You can also shoot log videos with this phone, which are basically RAW equivalent for videos where the videos capture incredible amount of details without any pre or post processing. These videos are very important for professional videographers who like to preserve all of the details in the videos and like to edit and color grade their videos later on. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, as one, I know there are 95% of the people who are not even going to do this once on their phone, and two, for people who are interested in this, there is so much to talk about this that it will make the video much longer than it already is. Here's the thing, if enough of you are interested in checking out the full video capabilities of this iPhone 16 Pro, let me know in the comments, and if we get enough requests, I will make a separate dedicated video all about that. And just like that, we have seen close to 150 image and video samples from all of the cameras of this iPhone 16 Pro. If you guys remember, last year I did not like the overall experience of taking images with the iPhone 15 Pro. I loved the images that it took, but I didn't like the overall experience as it got very hot very often. Thankfully, that is not an issue on the iPhone 16 Pro. It just doesn't heat up as much. And whenever it gets a bit warm, like in conditions when you're shooting outside in bright sun for maybe 1 or 2 hours, it cools down pretty soon as well. I feel like the cameras on the 16 Pro are amazing. The upgrades to the ultra-wide and the telephoto lens are a welcome change, and the main camera, as you would expect from a top-of-the-line iPhone, does an amazing job in most of the lighting conditions. This would be an amazing phone to upgrade to if you are coming from any phone which is over 3 or 4 years old, as that is when you will actually be noticing all of the differences and upgrades that this 16 Pro brings along. If you are already using an iPhone 14 Pro or the 15 Pro, I honestly don't think that you are going to notice that big of a difference if you decide to make the switch. And if you are thinking of switching for the new camera control button, please don't, as I, along with many people, find it to be one of the most useless additions which Apple has brought out in quite a while. That is it for this video, guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel for a lot more quality tech videos like this. You can also check out some of the other videos from this channel. This has been Sagar, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.